Welcome to our channel. In this episode, we will continue with the moon landing conspiracies. If you missed the previous episode, I'll recommend you watch it on our YouTube channel. Alright, without further ado, let's begin this episode. During the moon landing, the astronauts used cameras equipped with special crosshair guides. These guides were designed to assist with precise positioning during photo development. In the lunar photos, one can easily spot these crosshair guides. Logically, since these guides were installed inside the cameras, they should appear on the outermost layer of the photos. However, observant enthusiasts have noticed something peculiar in certain photos. It is evident that an object obstructs the crosshair, suggesting that this object was likely pasted onto the photo using ancient photoshopping techniques. There is even a photo where an astronaut salutes the American flag, but his shadow beneath him mysteriously disappears. Could it be that the person editing the photo forgot to include the shadow? The crosshair on the American flag shows clear signs of fading and tampering. These are just a few of the approximately 20 points of skepticism raised by enthusiasts. Here, I have selected 6 of the most intriguing points to share with you. In fact, there is another novel doubt. Starting from Apollo 1, astronauts who refused to cooperate and investigators who attempted to expose the secrets have all mysteriously died. Following these doubts, if manned space travel cannot pass through the Van Allen radiation belt, then NASA must have used a pre-recorded film to simulate the live moon landing broadcast. So, who could have been behind the creation of this film? Back in 2002, just 37 days after the buzz incident, on October 16, the French-German public television aired a documentary called Dark Side of the Moon. The content of the documentary was quite explosive. It featured real-life actors such as former U.S. National Security Advisor Henry Kissinger, former CIA Director Richard Helms, Deputy Chief Vernon Walters, former Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, and 2 former Secretaries of State, Lawrence Eagleburger and Alexander Haig. Additionally, the second person to set foot on the moon, Buzz Aldrin, was also prominently featured. Clearly, this was a heavyweight and serious documentary. However, upon closer examination of its content, everyone was left dumbfounded. The story was so exaggerated and sensational that it raised questions about how the director managed to gather such a lineup of influential figures to testify. Could it be that the director wasn't joking with the content? As it turns out, the main focus of Dark Side of the Moon was the origin of the famous urban legend that the live moon landing was fake, and that it was actually a film directed by Stanley Kubrick in a studio. Perhaps everyone has heard of this urban legend, but they may not be familiar with the details behind it. Specifically, it goes something like this. Firstly, Dark Side of the Moon presents a huge mystery right from the beginning, which is that Stanley Kubrick filmed the famous historical movie, Barry Lyndon, in 1975. When the film was released, all colleagues in the film industry were stunned because the movie depicted the authentic aristocratic life of the 18th century entirely using candlelight for night scenes. This was deemed impossible, not just at that time but even now. No director would dare to shoot in such a way. For example, if you try to take night photos with a smartphone, think back to a few years ago when it was impossible to achieve. Even if your phone's flashlight was bright enough to illuminate several meters away, the resulting photos would still be pitch black. It was only in recent years, with the introduction of AI algorithms, that your phone can finally help you capture those night scenes. However, how could a camera from 1975 capture candlelit night scenes? Colleagues in the film industry at that time considered Kubrick to be a genius. How did he achieve such a feat? The mystery persisted for 24 years until it was unraveled by Kubrick's wife in 1999. She appeared in Dark Side of the Moon and revealed that in '99, when my husband had recently passed away, roughly a few months prior, I started sorting through his belongings. Suddenly, I came across a classified document from NASA, and out of curiosity, I decided to take a look. I thought to myself, was my husband secretly involved with NASA? As it turned out, the document stated that when Barry Lyndon was being filmed, my husband had come prepared. He had already planned the candlelit night scenes and had ingeniously approached NASA, who lent him 3 lenses. The confidential document indicated that in 1966, NASA had ordered 10 of these specialized lenses capable of capturing night scenes with starry skies from the Carl Zeiss Corporation. My husband managed to borrow 3 of them. However, adhering to the principles of secrecy, my husband had never disclosed this to anyone, including me. But now, the mystery deepens. How did Kubrick know that NASA had these lenses? At that time, during the space race between the United States and the Soviet Union, the ability to capture night scenes in space was the highest classified information within NASA. Continuing from there, Kubrick not only knew about the lenses but also managed to borrow 3 of them. At this point, it's no longer a question of whether Kubrick is a genius. He seemed more like a commander well-versed in the Apollo program. Moreover, this film commander held certain secrets that NASA couldn't refuse. So, what could this secret be? Dark Side of the Moon continued along this line of thinking and interviewed a series of high-ranking officials who were involved in the Apollo program. Although their statements were vague, through editing and arrangement, the secret began to emerge. It appeared that in 1969, NASA owed Kubrick a massive debt of gratitude. Under top-secret conditions, Kubrick had helped them complete the filming of the moon landing. Now, they had to repay Kubrick for this debt. Why did NASA choose Kubrick? First, let's look at this black and white film. The visuals in the footage are incredibly powerful, comparable to any modern CG animation. But take note, it's called Dr. Strangelove, and it was directed by Kubrick in 1963. 2001. A Space Odyssey. Notice how the foreground and background seamlessly blend together. But was the iconic ape and monolith scene really filmed on the vast African savanna? Clearly not. It was a filming technique called front screen projection, magnified by Kubrick's wild imagination. In simpler terms, just like the footage you're seeing, shooting Mount Fuji through an airplane window, doesn't it look incredibly sophisticated? Yet, in the next moment, it shatters your perception. Are our eyes so easily deceived? Indeed, Kubrick found the 3M factory, which had just developed a new type of movie screen called Scotch light. It embedded millions of microscopic glass beads with powerful reflectivity. With just a small amount of light, it could create the kind of self-illuminating special effects we see on today's screens. So, when actors stood in front of this screen, the real-life foreground seamlessly merged with the projected background, and your eyes would never know the difference. Kubrick accomplished all of this. His genius idea, bringing us 2001. A Space Odyssey, happened in 1968, precisely 1 year before the live broadcast of the moon landing. So, when we consider the grand space sci-fi elements in 2001. A Space Odyssey, don't you find something peculiar about it? That's right. Let's compare a few lunar landing photos with scenes from 2001. A Space Odyssey. Can't you see the clear dividing line between foreground and background in the lunar landing photos? There's a noticeable difference in texture between the rough lunar surface in the foreground and the smooth background. A Hollywood producer who wished to remain anonymous also said that he was Stanley Kubrick's brother-in-law and trusted producer, Jan Harlan. This producer stated, without a doubt, that when I saw those moon landing photos, I can tell that this is his magic with only a peek. So, the legend of Kubrick's involvement in the moon landing photoshoot is not over yet. The anonymous producer further pointed out the strong implications in Kubrick's next work, The Shining. The Shining is a highly acclaimed psychological horror film. It features a withdrawn son, a weathered father, and a peculiar mother. According to the anonymous source, the son represents Kubrick's innocence and purity, while the parents symbolize Kubrick's jaded and compromised sense of morality in the adult world filled with lies. In terms of visual cues, the Native American mural on the hotel walls resembles a rocket ready for launch. The hexagonal pattern on the carpet represents the shape of a rocket launch pad in the Apollo program. When the young boy stands up, his sweater pattern is the Apollo 11 spacecraft, the same one that Armstrong and Aldrin supposedly used for their moon landing and live broadcast. Another important hint is the room number 237 in the film. It's worth noting that Kubrick was faithful to the original novel while adapting The Shining, where the room number was actually 217. Kubrick changed it to 237, which is a symbolic reference. The Apollo 11 spacecraft orbited at a distance of precisely 237,000 miles from Earth during its mission to the Moon. There is a classic horror scene in The Shining, where the wife discovers her husband repeatedly typing the phrase, "All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy." If you pay close attention, the word "all" at the beginning is not actually spelled as ALL, but as A11, resembling Apollo 11. This could be seen as Kubrick subtly hinting at the Apollo 11 mission. When combined with the psychological horror elements in The Shining, it creates a sense that Kubrick was hinting at something significant in his own life. In reality, figures like Kubrick, Armstrong, and Aldrin, who were social elites of their time, possessed strong internal beliefs. If they were truly involved in such a massive global deception, it would be difficult for them to find inner peace. They would likely seek ways to express their feelings to the outside world. For example, Buzz Aldrin's hesitation to swear on the Bible, and even enthusiasts pointing out that his punch was his most genuine response, all contributed to the spread of the moon landing conspiracy theories. Aldrin may have wanted more people to actively discover the mysteries of that era. Moreover, by examining the peculiar behaviors of Aldrin and others, fans have seemingly uncovered even more clues. Buzz Aldrin is a Freemason member with a well-defined identity. Setting aside urban legends, the Freemasons are actually a group of devout believers comprising Christians and non-Christians who share the common characteristic of religious devotion. Buzz Aldrin, as a member of the Freemasons and an elder of the Presbyterian Church, would never dare to violate his own faith. For instance, in the non-fiction book published in 1994, A Man on the Moon, it recounts one of Buzz Aldrin's clandestine religious activities. Aldrin told the author of the book that he was the first and only person to have conducted a religious ceremony on the moon. He brought a communion kit from a pastor and devoutly recited the sacrament. In the Christian belief, the blood and flesh of Jesus are symbolized by wine and bread, respectively, making the sacrament a profoundly sacred act of welcoming Jesus Christ. After completing this ritual, he recited a long passage from the Bible. Specifically, John chapter 15 verse 5, "I am the vine. You are the branches. Whoever remains in me, and I in him, will bear much fruit, for you can do nothing without me." After reciting that passage from the Bible, Buzz Aldrin followed Armstrong and became the second person to set foot on the moon. Later, Buzz kept this episode a secret because even during the Apollo 8 mission, the astronauts collectively read a passage from Genesis while orbiting the moon. When they returned, they faced lawsuits from atheists. and even lost their qualifications to continue as astronauts. However, Buzz disregarded the consequences and the fact that Armstrong was the first to step foot on the moon. He felt compelled to adhere to his faith and perform the sacrament on the lunar surface. Despite the potential loss of his qualifications, Buzz prioritized his beliefs. Even if it meant allowing Armstrong to be the first, Buzz had to fulfill his religious obligations and partake in the sacrament on the moon. Here's a recording of Buzz's radio transmission when he set foot on the moon. We can listen to it and continue. After returning from the moon, we know that Armstrong became a reclusive philosopher, rarely appearing in public and remaining silent. On the other hand, Buzz frequently made public appearances, and we believed that he and Armstrong were complementary. However, what we didn't know was that Buzz struggled with depression and alcoholism after his return. These stories are all disclosed by Buzz Aldrin himself in his book. So, what did they really see on the moon back then? Did they actually land on the moon at all? Here is a segment from a 2015 video interview with 85-year-old Buzz Aldrin conducted by a young journalist. The journalist asks, "Why has nobody been to the moon in such a long time?"
Why has nobody been to the moon in such a long time?
Buzz Aldrin responds, "That's not an 8-year-old's question. That's my question. I want to know, but I think I know."
That's not an 8-year-old's question. That's my question. I want to know, but I think I know. Because we didn't go there, and
in general, his answer is extremely vague, with a lot of semantic inversions and evasions. The little girl would be completely confused. Enthusiasts keenly caught on to one semantic emphasis in Buzz's strange response: "We didn't go there."
because we didn't go there, and that's the way it happened. And
well, although taken out of context, Buzz's answer is indeed peculiar and ambiguous. There is an even more explosive segment from an interview with Buzz. In 2005, at the age of 75, Buzz surprisingly stated, "We observed a lighted object that appeared to be moving relative to us. We didn't directly tell Houston, Texas, about the light following us. So strictly speaking, we encountered an unidentified flying object during our trip around the moon."
So technically, it becomes an unidentified flying object.
Buzz later clarified that he was 99.9% certain that the supposed moving object was a panel from the separation adapter. His words were taken out of context, and he had actually requested a correction from the television station, which was refused. Therefore, if we approach these doubts from a more realistic perspective, many of the questions raised have more reasonable explanations. For example, the reference to room 237 in The Shining is actually a misinterpretation, since the average distance between Earth and the Moon is approximately 239,000 miles. Regarding the multiple light sources, the additional light source is highly likely to be Earth's reflection. Similar to how we see moonlight from Earth, this phenomenon, known as Earthshine, is significantly brighter on the Moon, about 50 times stronger than moonlight. The issue of crosshairs in photographs is explained by the early development of photographic technology, which resulted in some deviations. A comparison between photographs from 1998 and 2004 clearly demonstrates the reasons for these discrepancies. As for the letter C on a rock, NASA states that it is a contamination flaw caused by a curly hair. Additionally, the Van Allen radiation belt, which is often mentioned in urban legends as an impassable barrier, has been measured by experimental teams. An 8-centimeter thick combination of stainless steel, fiberglass, and aluminum can effectively block 99.9% of proton radiation and 99% of electron radiation. Furthermore, NASA designed a precise path to navigate through the Van Allen radiation belt, avoiding areas of high radiation. As for the pristine surface of the lunar lander, NASA also states that the classic moon experiment best illustrates this. The astronauts simultaneously released a hammer and a feather, and indeed, both landed at the same time. This is because the moon has no air resistance, so the dust particles on the moon, without air resistance, fall quickly when disturbed. By the time the lunar lander descended, all the dust had settled, resulting in a clean surface. There are also third-party evidences that support the Apollo moon landings, such as the 2018 demonstration by NVIDIA, where they used their powerful graphics cards to calculate the trajectories and lighting of every particle in the moon landing footage. This ray tracing technology ultimately proved the authenticity of the moon landing footage. Additionally, in 2021, India's Chandrayaan-2 captured images of what appeared to be the lower half of the Apollo 11 lunar module, and we can still observe the lunar rover tracks today. In conclusion, there are many pieces of evidence supporting the Apollo moon landings. Those who debunk conspiracy theories argue that faking the moon landings would be even more challenging than actually going to the moon. However, how people perceive these issues varies. It is worth noting that the Artemis program, NASA's plan to return humans to the moon, is said to be underway and scheduled for a crewed mission in December 2025. Perhaps, as Armstrong once said, people love conspiracy theories. Some in there is very attractive, but it was never a concern to me. Because I know that one day somebody's gonna go fly back up there and pick up the camera that I left. So, let's wait and see what happens in December next year.